All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Toolbox Tuesday. Super excited for this one. Today's focus is going to be on the new Pay Compass Gateway, which we haven't revealed the name yet, but just for go ahead and throw it out there, is going to be called PayVault. Super excited about this. I mean, we all know the importance that gateways play in today's payments landscape. There really are connectivity for so many things, whether it be e-commerce transactions or even just somebody just wants a standard virtual terminal. Those are all gateways. And you've all heard me talk about how we're trying to create the Pay Compass experience through and through as much as we possibly can. The really 2022 has been about trying to create as much of that as possible to make your lives simpler and make our merchants' lives simpler as well. And this is just a continued effort in that. We've spent a lot of time over the last year really looking and researching different solutions to create that Pay Compass experience. And the gateway was one of the big ones. And we talked to quite a few different providers out there that custom make gateways and white label gateways and just different options out there. And really excited that we settled on Accept.Blue, which is who you're going to be hearing from today. They're our partner. What you're going to notice that it's a full, custom Pay Compass experience, but with the power and the experience and the expertise of the Accept.Blue team. So I'm really excited for this one. There's going to be a lot of information thrown at you, a lot of stuff as always. We'll have this presentation out there for you to be able to view later on, and pricing and follow-up information will come by the end of the day. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ben Frisch. I'm not sure how he's related to Steve Frisch, but he's got to be somehow. But Ben Frisch, who is the Director of Business Development and one of the big wigs over at Accept.Blue. So Ben, we're going to hand it over to you, buddy.
Thank you so much, Justin. I like big wig. I think maybe I'll go with that as the title.
You should go with that one.
Yeah. But I appreciate it, Justin. Thank you for the intro, guys. It's truly a pleasure and an honor for me to be presenting today. I'm really excited to bring this product to the Pay Compass family, and I'm excited to be working with each and every one of you, giving you a better solution, a better platform to help you sell and service your merchants successfully. So from now already, I'm thanking you for listening to me. And I'll try to make this as informative and as good use of a time as I can. So I'll start by sharing my screen to start giving an idea of what we're talking about. So the talk today is about a payment gateway, which basically allows your merchants to log into a virtual terminal and process transactions. You'll notice right away, you can see that what you're looking at the screen is a Pay Compass branded gateway. The domain that the virtual terminal is hosted on, that the gateway is hosted on, is mypayvault.com. That's where your merchants will be going to process transactions. And the benefits of using a white label gateway is that your merchants see it as your product. As far as your merchants are concerned, this is a Pay Compass gateway, which it is, and that gives you not only stronger branding and a more professional image, but it gives you stickier merchants, because your merchants are less likely to move from something which is a Pay Compass product than they are, for example, if they're using something that's branded as authorized.net, and then someone comes along and pitches the same authorized.net with 5 basis points off, that makes for an easier switch for them, versus when they're using something which is branded to you guys. You can rest assured that these merchants will be sticking with you longer than they would with maybe some of the other standard gateways. So everything that your merchants will come across will be branded as Pay Compass. Let's start right away with the demo of the actual product, of the actual gateway. Another thing I hope you've noticed right away is the user experience and interface. So we'll go through a couple of features, but one of our biggest focuses at Accept.Blue is creating a gateway that is user-friendly and simple and as uncomplicated as we can get it to be. We know that not all your merchants are tech savvy, and maybe most of them are not tech savvy. So we wanted a product which, with all the features that it has, it doesn't confuse people. It follows a certain flow. It's easier to work with. It has a modern interface. Let's go ahead and talk about, before we even start running transactions, what at its core this gateway is meant to accomplish. So there are card not present merchants, and then there are card present merchants. We're going to talk about card present in just a couple of minutes, but I want to start with card not present. So your classic card not present merchant needs the ability to process transactions in a virtual terminal. That's the basic need that your merchants that are in a card not present space will need. But there are so many features and value-added features and solutions that you can bring these merchants that not only help them in their business, it helps them stick around with you longer, it makes it easier for them, it helps them process more efficiently, etc. And a lot of these features, we've tried to build as many features as we can into this virtual terminal itself without having to send your merchants to third-party softwares, or having redirects, or having to come in contact with different companies. We've tried to put everything into this virtual terminal. So let's go ahead and start processing an actual transaction so we see what it looks like. I'm going to operate out of dark mode. It's my personal preference, but if your merchants prefer light mode, they can switch at any time. Right now we're looking at the dashboard. There's not much going on over here. This is a brand new Sandbox account, so it's pretty fresh. But your merchants will get a basic overview of what's going on in their account on this dashboard. I'm going to go ahead to process transaction, and we're going to run through a basic transaction so you'll get a feel of what that looks like. Before I run an actual transaction, I want to talk about one of the best-selling features of this gateway, and that's automatic level 2 and 3 data, otherwise known as interchange optimization, automatic interchange optimization. For those of you that are familiar with this, you'll have to forgive me, but I want to give a little bit of a background to what this is. Basically, when merchants process transactions and are processing business cards or purchasing cards or credit cards that are used when businesses are making payments from one business to another. So contrast that to whenever me and you walk into our local supermarket, we're using a personal card to make a purchase. That's a personal card. That's a consumer card. When we're talking about level 2 and 3, we're specifically talking about transactions that are made from business to business using credit cards that belong to businesses versus consumers. And when these credit cards are used to make transactions, the card brands are willing to give significantly lower interchange rates for a couple of different reasons. Not so important for today, but they wanted to expedite the adoption of businesses using credit cards. They like the data that they receive on these transactions. That's valuable to them. So for a couple of different reasons, card brands are willing to lower interchange rates significantly on credit cards that are used when businesses make purchases or payments to another business using business credit cards. The problem with this is that the card brands are only going to lower those rates if they receive a lot of additional data. And that data is referred to as level 2 and 3. So your basic transaction, which is a card number, expiration, zip, that's a level 1 transaction. The more data that's added to a transaction, the more information that's added, that turns it into a level 2 transaction when it's got an invoice number, etc. And then when there's even more information added, it turns into a level 3 transaction. The more information, the lower the interchange rate gets. So on level 1 transactions, you're paying your standard pretty high interchange rate. Level 2, a little bit better. Level 3, the lowest you can get. So what we want to do is make sure that when your B2B merchants are processing credit cards that are eligible for these lower rates, that all this additional information is sent along to the card brand so that the card brands could say, hey, look at this transaction. It's got 25 pieces of data on it, qualifies for level 3. We're going to give them 1.65% less on this transaction that they would have paid otherwise. So back in the olden days, what a merchant needed to do was manually enter all that additional information. So instead of just entering a card number and a zip, they would have to enter an invoice number, a SKU, a product reference number, a tax rate, a tax indicator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, basically the manual labor canceled out the benefits of the lower interchange rates because they're paying somebody to enter all that information. So, they might be getting lower interchange rates, but they're also spending money on entering all that information. With the new PayCompass gateway, all that manual labor is completely automated. So when your B2B merchant is going to be running a transaction, all they're going to be entering is basic transaction details like a card number, expiration, and zip. But on the back end, the gateway will be adding 20 plus fields of additional information to make sure that this transaction qualifies for significantly lower interchange rates. So every transaction is sent along with all information needed to qualify it as a level 3 transaction. Now, again, not all transactions are eligible for level 2 and 3. It has to be a credit card that belongs to a business. It has to be a B2B transaction. But for those transactions that are eligible, your gateway will completely automate that process so that your merchant doesn't have to enter any information, and they'll automatically get those lower interchange rates. So as you can imagine, this is a game-changing feature specific for all merchants, but specifically B2B merchants that process a lot of these qualifying transactions. And it makes for a very easy sell, because if you're going to B2B merchant, which are historically, they're not excited to switch processors or they're not excited to take credit cards, but you can come to them with a solid proposition of saying, listen, I can get you much lower interchange rates because my system automates a lot of data needed for the card banks to give you lower rates. And that's something that most gateways won't do, or even if they do, it won't be as seamless as with the PayCompass gateway. So that's something that I wanted to bring across very clearly, because it's definitely a feature that will help you sell, and that will and it's just a huge value add for your B2B merchants. So let's go ahead and select the customer. Enough of me talking for a little bit. I've selected a test customer. I've only stored one customer here. So I have a credit card stored for this customer. I actually have 2 credit cards stored. I'm just going to keep this one for now. I'm going to go ahead and enter an amount of $12, and I can go ahead right now and process this transaction. Again, to spend one more moment to level 2 and 3, as you can see, I haven't entered any additional information, just basic credit card details. But what's actually going to happen when I process this transaction is that there's going to be a lot of information automatically generated and sent along to the processor to help qualify this transaction for level 2 and 3. Okay, enough for level 2 and 3 now. Let's continue. So before I actually process this transaction, there's a couple of optional things that a merchant can do to help them out. So they can add transaction details, like basic transaction details. They can add billing and shipping information if they want to, and they can also set up a recurring payment. So one of the industries we see using this gateway a ton is schools, camps, nonprofits, and a lot of them rely on the recurring payment element. So they just click on this checkbox, they'll put in a title and amount of times or make it ongoing. They'll basically fill out all the information here. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, a recurring schedule will be created when we process this transaction. Okay, I'll leave it off for now because I want to give you an idea of a basic transaction without too much information. We'll go ahead and click on process transaction. We'll get an approved message, the ability to print email, or just click done. So that was a basic card transaction. We also looked at setting up a recurring payment. What if a merchant needs to add additional information to a transaction? So control panel allows you to add an additional 20 fields over here called custom fields that the merchant can use to add as much information as they need to a transaction. One more, or actually 2 more things on this tab before we move on. Is surcharge and ACH. So let's talk about ACH first. So if you have a merchant, and again, this goes back really to B2B merchants, those are the ones that really use ACH, that wants to be able to take ACH via the virtual terminal, that's definitely something your gateway offers. So if you set them up with an ACH account, they'll have a check option right over here next to card. They can select the customer, and they'll have the same functionality as they do by cards. They can run an ACH. Now, when it comes to surcharge, I'm going to leave it to Justin to talk about what models you want to use for your merchants. But from the gateway standpoint, all options are on the table. So you can set up a merchant with a compliant surcharge model, which means a fee will only be applied to credit, but not debit or prepaid. So the gateway will recognize in real time if this is a credit card or a debit card, and it's only going to apply the surcharge to the credit card, but not debit card. That's option 1, model A. You can also do sort of a service fee or convenience fee model, which is when the fee is applied to all transactions, credit, debit, across the board. You can have separate fees for card and ACH. You can have percentages and dollar amounts. Really, when it comes to fees and surcharges, all options are on the table. Obviously, it's up to the ISO to make these decisions. But from a tech standpoint, you'll be able to set it up in any manner in which you and your merchant prefer.
And feel free to talk about all of them. We give all those choices to our agents, so they can do NCA, surcharging, cash discounting, whatever works for them.
Perfect. So maybe just a moment more over here then. So for this account wasn't configured by the ISO. The ISO basically left it up to the merchant. So as the merchant, I can just click on my settings button and I can hard code, let's say, a 4% surcharge on card transactions. And now I've got a 4% sitting there. So I put in $15. It's going to apply 4%. It's going to do it on every transaction. Every time I enter a transaction, a surcharge will be applied. If the ISO in this case would have configured my account to be compliant, then I wouldn't be able to touch this. It would be all completely grayed out. They would see 4%, and again, the gateway would react accordingly. If it's credit or debit, again, if you don't want your merchant to touch surcharge, even if you don't want to set it up in a compliant manner, you want to do it as a convenience fee, a service fee model, you can restrict access from the merchant. It's up to you. You can leave it to the merchant to decide when to apply a fee. You can take control. You can make it compliant, not compliant. Like Justin said, you have all options, both from the ISO standpoint and from the gateway end. Something that is very popular these days is sort of a cash discount, a dual pricing model. Again, there's different names and people call it different things, but especially for merchants that are set up with the ACH, a very easy way for your merchant to configure a surcharge is by saying, if you pay me by ACH, you won't have a surcharge. If you pay me by card, you will, etc. But again, it's really up to you. So I think that's pretty much it for the process transaction page. I wanted to give a good idea of what it's like to run a basic transaction, apply a surcharge, ACH transaction, and set up a recurring schedule as well. Let's go ahead and click on the batches tab, which is where the transaction that we just did appears. This is our $12 transaction we just processed just a minute ago. Your merchants can have up to 3 auto batch closures per day. So this one is set to close automatically at 12:56 for whatever reason. They can have an additional 2 automatic closures, and they can manually close a batch at any time. Until a batch has closed, transactions haven't yet settled. So there's a couple of things a merchant can do. They can adjust a transaction. This is something we only released a couple of weeks ago. I'm still pretty excited about it. It basically means a merchant can adjust the amount of the transaction either up or down, even after they already ran that charge. So as long as it hasn't settled, they can adjust that amount. Something else they can do is void the transaction because it hasn't yet settled. They can recharge. They can also queue. So I'm going to show you what queue is because it's a unique feature to your gateway. I'm going to queue this transaction that we just did. It disappeared from the batches. There's no more $12 transaction, and it's sitting in the queue tab. And basically what this means is that this is now an authorized only transaction. So because we just took back a step, it's just an auth. It won't settle when the batch closes. When I'm ready, I can capture it, put it back into the batch, and now the next time the batch will close, this transaction will settle. There's different unique use cases for that, and I can definitely get more into detailed use cases with at the question and answer session. I'm going to try to keep it more general until that point. One more feature on this page is batch upload, which allows your merchant to upload a CSV file with an unlimited amount of transactions, either card, ACH. As long as it's templated correctly, they can upload, click on process, and the gateway will process all of these transactions on its own. So if your merchant has a CSV file with 1,000, 5,000 transactions, let's say, they don't have to manually key each one. They can just come here, upload it, and click on process, and the gateway will take care of everything. Again, happy to talk about different use cases at the Q&A. That's as far as batches goes. Let's skip ahead a little bit to reports because it's sort of related to batches. And these are the transactions we just did. Again, this is my $12 transaction. I'll click on the eyeball, which in the PayCompass gateway always gives you additional details, as much information as we have. So I'll click on that. It'll open up this transaction, and it'll give you all the information that we have. It'll give you additional options like printing, emailing, again, adjusting, voiding, recharging, queuing. Let's actually, forgive me for a moment, I'm just going to close this batch so we I'll be able to show you how a refund works. I'll go back to reports. Again, I'll open up my transaction. And now, because this is a settled transaction, the batch is closed, I can now recharge, but I can also refund. I can do a partial refund. I'll just enter the amount and click on refund. There's something else I want to mention on this page. It's not something I can show you because I didn't set up this specific account to have that functionality, but sometimes you'll come across merchants that have multiple accounts. So let's talk about a use case of an owner who has 10 locations. And in that scenario, you don't need to give the owner 10 sets of credentials for their 10 MIDs, their 10 accounts. What we can do instead is give one user or some users access to multiple accounts. So instead of just having one account, they'll have a drop down over here of their 10, 20, 200 accounts, so they can just toggle from account to account without having to log out and log in. In addition, in their reports tab, which is where we are right now, they're going to have a button called Select Merchants, which is going to allow them to see all transactions from some or all of their accounts in one place. So it makes life a lot easier for these multi-mid or franchise merchants, as they're sometimes called. Again, I apologize that I can't show it to you because I haven't configured the account that way, but that's definitely something you should keep in mind as you come across these multi-mid or multiple account merchants. Okay, so one of the maybe so far we've mentioned some of the best selling features of this gateway, which is the automatic level 2 and 3, the ACH, the user interface and experience, and the white label. We also spoke about recurring. I want to talk about invoices because we've seen this as time goes on. This becomes a greater and greater selling point for resellers of this gateway. And what invoices does is basically allow your merchant to send an invoice to their customer, either via email, text message, or both. Text message is something that is becoming increasingly popular. And the customer will get an invoice, they'll click on the invoice, the link in the invoice, see the invoice details, make a payment, and pay off the invoice. So there's a products tab which allows you to store products and with descriptions and prices. Again, this is a fresh Sandbox account. There's not much that I can show you here, but let's go back over here and click on new invoice. Now this invoice is completely brandable to the merchant. It'll have their logo here. You set that up in control panel. Their company information, so your merchants feel really good about these invoices. It makes them look professional. I'll select my customer that I've got stored over here, and I'll scroll down and add lines. If I have some existing products, I'd be able to use that. I'm just going to add a sample product here. Sample 1. I'll put a unit cost of say $12, and that's going to be my total now. Can add a discount, edit how much is required. Let's say I only want 50% upfront. I can add a surcharge for card or ACH. I'm going to go ahead and click on, let's move this here. I'm going to click on send, and I'll get this pop up. I don't have an email stored for this customer, but if I would, the email would be stored here. I'd be able to enter, or I can enter a cell phone number. So I could just enter a cell phone number, multiple cell phone numbers, and it'll send it to my email, to my cell. I can attach my own files. I can play around with the subject line, the contents. I'm just going to click on send. We'll get a notification that it was sent successfully. And now I've got this this invoice sent. So my status is now sent. Once I click on that link, it'll change to viewed, and then as time goes on, it'll become paid or overdue, as the case may be. It's hard for me to show you what the invoice looks like because I just sent it to my cell phone. But basically, what it looks like is something like this. This is what the customer is going to see. They'll see their invoice details. They'll have a place to enter either their credit card if they're set up with an ACH as well. They'll have a signature box where they sign, and they'll click on pay. So it's a really easy way for merchants to collect payments from customers. The people we see, the industries we see using this more and more is the professional services. So far we spoke about one set of merchants that would really benefit from this gateway, and that's the B2B merchant. Those wholesalers, manufacturers, distributors, they stand to gain from level 2 and 3, from ACH. It's a really easy sell for those merchants. Another industry that you can really target with this gateway is professional services. And one of the tools you'll use is the invoices tool. So when I say professional services, we usually mean plumbers, contractors, HVAC, electricians, pool guys, gardeners, landscapers, home improvement, lawyers, insurance agents. Think about people that provide services but don't work out of a store. And these merchants, what they really need is a solid virtual terminal. So when you come with them with an easy to use virtual terminal that gives them everything they need and allows them to just instantly send an invoice to the customer and collect payment, that's going to give you an easier time selling. It's going to give you happier merchants. Let's go ahead and continue moving on over here. So the customers tab is where all the customers are stored. So for each customer, you'll see general information, wallet, which can store as many payment methods as they have. There's no limit. You'll see the full history. Basically, every piece of data associated with this customer is visible in this vault. And it's a piece, the Pay Compass Gateway is PCI level 1 compliant, so all the information is tokenized. There's no concerns that your merchants will have. Recurring is a log of all recurring schedules. So we see a lot of camps and nonprofits and schools using this gateway. And what they use a lot is the recurring schedules. So they'll have 500 recurring schedules. We only have one, but they can filter and find the ones they're looking for, turn it on, turn it off, delete it. And they can also update a recurring schedule at any point. So you click on the eyeball, you'll change the payment method, you'll change the frequency, the amount. Everything can be updated about this recurring schedule. We've seen reports, again, very comprehensive log of all transactions. The last two tabs that we have over here are fraud controls and control panels. So fraud controls could get pretty technical. For this call, at least until the Q&A, I'll just give a basic overview. It's incredible the amount of fraud protection that this gateway comes with, but most merchants won't have a need for so much fraud protection. So there's 10 modules, and each of them have a lot of customization. So I'm going to click on the first one just as an example, and this will give the merchant the ability to choose which transactions to accept or decline based on the address verification system. And the same thing goes for every piece of data associated with a transaction. One more thing I'll mention when we're talking about fraud protection is velocity control. So out of the 10 modules, the only one that's automatically activated in every merchant account is velocity control. And what velocity control does is make sure that your merchants are never hit with card testing. So some of you have probably unfortunately come across this. Some of you, if you haven't yet, you almost definitely will, where someone will set up a bot and then run tens of thousands of microtransactions on a merchant's website or hosted payment page, etc. This is extremely damaging to your merchant, obviously, for a number of different reasons. Velocity control is a module that we automatically activate on every one of your merchants, so that they all have a base level of protection to make sure this doesn't happen to them. So the gateway will automatically recognize there's card testing going on, shut down the source, and completely block further transactions from coming in. Again, happy to answer additional questions on fraud protection, but for now, let's move on to control panel. So that's where, general is where they'd set up where receipts should go to, what time a batch should close, invoices where they're going to upload their logo, company info, default terms and conditions, and do any sort of templating that they want for their invoices. Custom fields is the ability for the merchant to add up to 20 custom fields to that process transaction tab. So we'll run through, I'll show you what it looks like. We'll make one of them test 1, make one of them test 2, and I'll make this one required, and I'll click on save. So now I've used 2 of my custom fields. If I go to process transaction now, I have something over here called custom fields with my 2 fields that I just created with my labels, and this one is required. See that little star? So that if I try to process a transaction without entering anything over here, it won't go. It'll light up in red and tell them to enter something. So that's custom fields. Users, your merchant can have as many users as they want for this virtual terminal. There's no limit. They can activate, deactivate, restore passwords. When a merchant creates a new user, they have the ability to create master users with full permissions to do everything in the virtual terminal that we saw today, or they can leave it as, limited permission users and choose exactly what this specific user can do in this virtual terminal. Another thing over here is sources, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But first, I want to just knock out custom receipts. So custom receipts allows the merchant to customize the email receipt, that the customer gets on a transaction. So some of the more common use cases would be changing the name surcharge to, service fee, right? Or something similar, convenience fee. So now this is what the customer will see on the email. Or they can put their logo on the receipt, or they can put their logo on the receipt or a footer message. It's customizing the email receipt. The last thing over here is sources, and I want to spend just a moment over here. So with this, so far we've seen how to use this as a virtual terminal. So your merchant logs in to this gateway, and they process transactions, they send out invoices, etc., etc. What about merchants that are looking to take payments outside of this virtual terminal? So they have a website, they have a software, they need a hosted payment page. They're not looking to process transactions here, they're looking to take it outside of the gateway, but the transaction should run through the gateway account. So that's where sources comes into play. And one of the things that the PayCompass Gateway does very well is API integrations, and again, allowing payments to come outside of this gateway. And you have your own branded API docs, which includes regular API documentation, hosted tokenization, which, without getting too technical for people on this call, but when you're dealing with developers or ISVs, they're going to love hosted tokenization, because what it allows them to do is take payments in their software while remaining completely out of PCI scope. Because what they're doing is they're taking fields like the credit card number field, putting it into their software, but we're actually hosting those fields on our servers. So it's a big deal for those developers or those ISVs, because it allows them all the flexibility of an API integration without any of the compliance or risk that could sometimes come with API integrations. So that's as far as the APIs go. So again, to talk about creating a new integration, what you'll always do is create key, right? You'll put in a name of, let's say, name. We'll put in a PIN, and we'll go ahead, select some of these just so we have what to work with. We'll click on save, and now I just created an API key. I can take this, copy and paste it, plug it into my software, and assuming the integration was built successfully, now that software can take payments, and it'll run through the gateway. Each of my sources could be separately managed. I can manage each source of payment separately, but that's how it works. One other thing while we're talking about sources is a hosted payment page. So that's definitely something we can, this gateway supports. So I'll just give you an example of just one to show you what it looks like. So it would have the merchant's logo, and then it would collect transaction details, payment details, whatever fields you want displayed, and then your customer can just click on process. So this works a little bit different than invoices, meaning invoices is when your merchant is looking to collect payment from one specific customer for a specific amount and a one-time use link. Whereas a hosted payment page, we usually see that merchants take this and put it on their website under a Pay Now button. We have a ton of nonprofits using this. They take the link, they put it under a Donate Now button. It's a much more versatile way of collecting payments. It's an open amount field that is just open to, and this page is open to anybody with browser access. So it's definitely a big value add that we see being used more and more, and you should definitely use it when selling to merchants. This is a great option. So don't be afraid of APIs. Don't be afraid of integrations. In the past, maybe some of the other gateways you're using were not so easy to deal with when it came to customizations and stuff like that. But this PayCompass Gateway gives everything your developers or your merchants will need to build out integrations or plugins, etc., etc. We'll give you anything that you need from a technical standpoint to build these out. Now, there are a lot of shopping carts that are already pre-built for this gateway and integration, so I'll list them just really quickly. WooCommerce, Magento, Salesforce, NetSuite, Gravity Forms, We also have this also has a QuickBooks integration. So there's quite a few things that are already pre-built that you don't need to then go and build out a new integration. But even if you come across something which isn't yet integrated, again, the APIs will give you everything that you need. If anybody is still awake, I want to mention one more thing before Q&A, and that's EMV terminals. I understand from Justin that a lot of you sell to the card present space, so I want to talk about that for a minute. So we've integrated to a company called Equinox Devices. Let's bring them up over here so I can show you exactly what we're talking about. So your gateway is integrated to these two devices, the 6200, the 8500. And now this device, as an example, comes with a bunch of different iterations. So with printer, without printer, wired, not wired. And if a merchant is set up with one of these devices, then on this right over here next to card and check, they'll have a tab called terminal. They'll select their customer like they do for a regular card transaction, and they'll click on submit transaction. It's going to light up the terminal that's connected to the gateway, meaning it's configured to talk to the gateway. The customer will swipe, dip, or tap, and the transaction will be processed through the gateway. So it's a classic semi-integration, which means the virtual terminal lights up the actual device, the actual terminal. So the gateway wakes up the terminal, customer completes the transaction, and it's processed through the gateway, and then they could see it in reports and refund and void and take all those type of actions. I understand that PayCompass already works with POS Portal, which is the distributor that will be carrying these devices. Unfortunately, they're currently out of stock. We expect them to restock very soon, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. And once they indeed restock, you'll be able to offer these EMV devices to your merchants. I think we've pretty much covered it all. I want to briefly just give a recap of what we spoke about today. We spoke about that this gateway is an excellent fit for many industries, and those would be the B2B industries, the moto industries, the basic card not present like professional services. So there's a whole lot of merchants that would be an excellent fit for this gateway. And once POS Portal gets some stock in, you'll be able to offer this to card present merchants as well. For those merchants that are doing heavy card present, like restaurants and strictly retail, this might not be the best fit. But for those hybrid merchants, or for those merchants that have a need for a virtual terminal and the EMV device, this is an excellent fit. So those are your target audiences. Your best-selling features are automatic level 2 and 3, ACH, email and text invoices, recurring payment, hosted payment pages, every type of surcharge, multi-MIT support, and of course, a beautiful user experience and interface. I thank each and every one of you for listening to that. That was a few minutes, so I appreciate that, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions and clarify anything that any of you might be troubled by.
Hey, Ben, real quick before we go to, there are a few questions in there, but before we go to that is, can you show the integrations that are currently out there for specifically thinking like on shopping carts?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to here for a moment. It'll just be easier. So you can always download a list of integrations right here, acceptw/integrations. It'll be a CSV file. Specifically when it comes to shopping carts, the ones we use right now would be, let's see, we've got WooCommerce. So that's extremely popular. It's a simple shopping cart. And there's also Magento for those more complex or those larger merchants. You'll sometimes find them using Magento too. There's also, we also actually have a Shopify plugin. It's a little bit different than your classic Shopify plugins. I'll briefly talk about it, and Justin, let me know if I should elaborate. But the Shopify plugin that we built uses a redirect method, which basically means that at the time of payment, the customer is redirected away from Shopify to a checkout page that's actually hosted by us. It looks like a Shopify checkout page, but it's actually a hosted payment page from the gateway. And the benefit with that is because there won't be any penalty, right? Usually Shopify imposes a 0.5% or 2% penalty on people using anything other than Shopify payments, like an Authorize.net plugin. Because we're using a redirect method, there's no penalty. Because as far as Shopify is concerned, there's no payment happening. So that's a big value add, and of course it automates level 2 and 3 like every integration of ours does. But the downside of this plugin, and something that you should be aware of, is that since in Shopify's mind the order was completed the second the redirect happened, because the order was just finished and the customer's redirected, they're going to immediately send out a receipt to the customer, even though the customer has yet to enter their payment information. So this could be very disturbing to some customers. It's a plugin that works for some, but won't work for others. So it depends how important getting rid of that penalty is, how important level 2 and 3 is for this merchant. It's sort of a trade-off between using something that it works specifically within Shopify, so you'll have that penalty, or using a redirect which won't have the penalty, but in which case it might be confusing to some customers because they're getting a receipt before they actually entered any payment information. So that's the short story on the Shopify plugin that we built.
Makes sense. And then so WooCommerce, Magento, obviously, and then QuickBooks integrations. Can you speak to that? I know that was one of the questions that came up as well.
Absolutely. So we work with a company called Verosa. Justin, I don't recall if we spoke about if PayCommerce works with Verosa.
Absolutely, we do. We're most people on this call are very familiar with them.
Okay, so great. So PayCommerce is an integrated gateway to Verosa. So you just have to select, this gateway as the gateway of choice. It's listed in Verosa as accept.blue, but if you select that as the gateway, it works like every other gateway, meaning you'll give them credentials and they can use the Verosa application. It'll be running through this gateway account. Again, automates level 2 and 3, so huge value add right there versus some of the other options.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, I think that answered all the questions that were in the chat already. So if anyone else has any other questions, you want to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat or text me and I'll answer it.
Hey, Justin, so
go for it, brother.
Can you hear me? Okay. So just to clarify on the products and services. So there's a few other gateways that are like this, like ChargeZoom, pretty similar, MX Merchant. And one of the biggest things that a lot of my customers want is the inventory side of things. But when that integrates with QuickBooks Online, all it does is just basically grab the products and services from QuickBooks and drags it over via the API. If this is just a standalone product, can you go ahead and put like, okay, I have 10 shoes, I create an invoice, I grab one of them. Is it going to now say that we have 9 on hand? Is it going to track the inventory?
Okay, that's a great question. So it actually will. So when you create a product, I'm going to do this slowly. Invoices, products, and then new product. So we're creating a new product over here. What you can do is, and again, this is not related to, just to clarify, this is not related to QuickBooks. So this is a standalone invoicing tool. If you're using QuickBooks through Verosa, then you're not using this invoicing tool. These are two separate invoicing products. This is the built-in one for the smaller to mid-sized merchants, and then your larger merchants will probably want to use something like QuickBooks through Verosa. But assuming you're talking about this built-in invoicing tool, so you can choose how much quantity you have. So you can, let's see, you can put in my current quantity is 50, and then it'll start counting. And once you hit 50, it'll say sold out. It won't allow you to add this specific product to the invoice.
That's huge. That's all I wanted to know, because that just helped me close a pretty big deal, because I pushed somebody to ChargeZoom because they wanted a gateway that invoiced people, but it did not track any inventory. So that's the biggest thing. And they wanted to use it as a standalone product, but ChargeZoom is really just a replacement for QuickBooks Online.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely.
And Ben, Ira will send you a chunk of his commission for that sale. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. Yeah.
All right, I'll send you an invoice.
Maybe a bottle of wine.
Related to that is when you create products or descriptions for invoicing, are they saved so that they can just do a drop down? They don't have to re-input that data.
Yeah,
I've got an advertising company, for example, that has quarter page ads, half page ads, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so let's actually run through one. so we see what it looks like. So we'll choose a product price. Let's say it's $50. I'll even make a wholesale price of 40. I'll do let's say a quantity of, we have 10, and I'll create the product. So now when I go ahead and create an invoice, I'm going to click on new invoice. Just select the customer, scroll down here. I'm going to click on add lines. I can just click on add existing product and just click on this product. I didn't make categories. You can create categories and subcategories. Just for the sake of time, I just created it as a no category product, but I can just select this. I can choose either retail price or my wholesale price. Let's just leave it as a retail price. And I'm going to go ahead and click on add it to the invoice. And there's my product right there.
Let's go.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
It looked like it grabbed the wholesale price though, Ben. What happened there?
I did? Let me see that again. Hold on. Add existing product, retail, wholesale, retail, wholesale.
Oh.
You're right. No, you're
It's
right.
not changing up above. Up
It's when you click off at one time, it goes back to that.
You go to
Yeah,
wholesale. That's it. I'm writing that down.
that's right. Getting out the whip on those developers.
Good catch. Good catch. Yeah. That's good. Interesting. All right. Yeah, you can choose, like, let's say if I do the quantity of, let's say 10, let's see. So I've got 13. I just added it to this because it's the same product. Okay. Yeah, that's
Another
pretty much
question
how it
about
works.
Another question about Magento. I have a deal that I'm working on specifically that this gateway is going to be used for. They have Magento. They need level 2, level 3, recurring billing, alter their website. What is so like with NMI, for instance, there's usually like just a username and password that you would plug into the payment section on the shopping cart. Is that similar with Magento? Like what does that look like here? Like what did they need to put in? What information they need to put in on the back end of Magento with this gateway?
So there's two steps. The first thing is that whoever manages their current Magento site, or whoever manages their website, will have to install the bundle. It's something that a technical person needs to do, either an IT guy or a developer. It takes just a few minutes, but it's installing some scripts and some out of the box code to their website. Once that's installed, they would go to control panel, sources, generate an API key like this, and then fork this over to that developer together with the PIN, so they can enter it as the credentials. So now this website is talking to this account.
So is it something like if you go to Magento and then you type in?
No.
How did they? Because
right. We'll have to send you the file.
Okay.
Right. We'll send you the file that contains the bundle and the scripts, and you'll just follow the steps.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A question on recurring billing. I have a gym that has somebody comes in, they want to come in 3 times a week for the next 3 months. And you set up recurring billing, so it'd be like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or it's going to be Monday and Thursday, or is it only on set days?
You cannot set it up by day. I mean, you could only set it up by like an interval, like by frequencies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. Is there a way, say you have a nonprofit that wants to give the donor an option to cover the credit card processing fees? A way to set up that is optional?
So yeah, we can do that on the hosted payment page, because that's very customizable. So what we can do is set up a hosted payment page that has a checkbox that says, click here to cover the 3% processing costs. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
It's awesome. Those are great features. And Ben, outside of on the fraud controls, outside of the velocity one, which is awesome, by the way, guys, I can tell you how many time having those velocity controls on gateways has really saved some of our merchants. But outside of velocity controls, what other ones do you see as pretty important that are used regularly?
Yeah, so the more common used modules would be well, basically the AVS response, because that's something that's simple enough to use. Most merchants have an understanding of how much of a match do they need to have in order to accept a transaction. But something else that we see outside of AVS is a transaction amount, which could be helpful. So especially, I mean, again, just to clarify, most of these fraud modules really come into play when we're talking about customer initiated transactions, like a website or hosted payment page, because when we're talking about a virtual terminal merchant where the merchant is running the transaction, for the most part, there aren't really concerns for fraud because the merchant is running it. The merchant knows the customers, has the cards. So we're talking about when a merchant has customer-facing payment sources, like a hosted payment page or a shopping cart. So in that case, setting a minimum and a maximum could also help because usually fraudsters will use something like $1 or $2, but most merchants aren't selling anything for that little. So if they know my cheapest product costs 10, my most expensive product costs 100, anything outside of these parameters is automatically not legit. So just block it, right? So that's something else that we see being used. Outside of that, I can't think of anything that we see a ton of use for. Email blocker could sometimes be used when they know of an email that specifically targets them, some scammer that comes back again and again, they can just enter blocked emails. But really between velocity control, AVS, and a minimum and maximum transaction amount, that pretty much covers the bulk of what we see being used.
Hey guys, those are all really great features that we get questions about those quite a bit in here. That flexibility to turn on or have that control, I guess I would say how adamant you want to be about that certain things have to match exactly, like the AVS response or the CVV response. If somebody's off on their CVV number or somebody's off on their AVS, but it matches on the zip code, like, hey, it's off on the address, but it matches on the zip code, you want to allow it. Having that flexibility is something pretty big. We get that question quite a bit from web developers and other people working on websites, that they want to have that flexibility and that control to say, I want to decide what goes through and not some gateway that's got arbitrary rules set up for me. So that's a really cool feature to have that flexibility on.
Right.
All right, awesome. Any other questions out there, guys? I think ran through the chat real quick. I think we've got most. Pricing will be coming out. Evan, pricing will be coming out later today on all this, along with some follow-up information. We try not to ever discuss pricing on these calls because these go public. All of these webinars are on our public YouTube channel, so we don't want to have pricing just out there. And also, you might be looking at this 5 years from now, this video, and we don't want anyone using the pricing we talk about on there. So the price will be coming out here shortly, but I can tell you that it's extremely competitive and better than any of our other offerings. So you're going to love it for sure. Any other questions, guys? Awesome. Well, I'm personally, I think you can tell how excited I am about this. I think this is a huge game changer of a product for us, having PayVault out there as our own gateway offering, our own ability to do things. And I think you're just seeing the beginning of this. I know Ben has many other things that their team is going to be adding as additional features coming up soon. So this is only going to get better and better and make our product offering that much stronger and that much stickier. So Ben, thanks for taking the time to do this. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for being here. If you got any questions, feel free to reach out, but more information will be coming out before the day is over.
Thanks
so much,
so much,
everybody.
Justin. Appreciate
Chat
it.
soon.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Thank you, guys.